So since we're broadcasting, we're responding to a question. And the question is, what is the difference between all these different approaches that we call yoga? It's important to understand what is the principle which we find in Vedanta, and then how to practice it. Practical portion we call yoga. Yoga is a term misunderstood, and I think Swami Purnananda last week addressed this issue. But I'll repeat some of the things. We think that when we think of yoga, naturally we think of either some milky thing to eat or maybe standing on your head or standing on somebody else's head, those kinds of things, yoga asanas. No doubt this is a form of yoga, but we clarify these terms when we bring in a vernacular. Instead of saying yoga and getting misunderstandings and misinterpretations, then simply say union. Yoga means to unite. It has two roots, yaj and yajya. That means to join something that is conjoined together, a junction of some kind, a meeting of some kind, a uniting of something, which indicates, of course, not only a goal of unity in the yoga philosophy being a dualistic philosophy. The idea is that the individual soul and the universal soul get united, become one. Of course, in the non-dualistic system, Advaita, it says they will already one. Oneness is already there. You don't have to achieve or accomplish any oneness. Either way, the process is called yoga. The process of unity is called yoga, and the goal is also called yoga. And when we derive it from the root that means concentration, we really are describing all the approaches in one way or the other. Another way of looking at concentration is to say, since the mind is a kind of field with all kinds of vagaries and ups and downs and waves within it, this gives us anxiety and disturbance. Consciousness, that is our birthright, flows through all the sense organs, 5 of them, to the outside world, the world of objects. Then the next question is, where do we get our pain from? We get our pain from these. Behavior. Behavior has 2 sections in it, reaction and recovery. How we react to an external circumstance. And then when we get a knock, how well do we recover? What formula do we have to recover? So any approach will have to be thoroughly practical. It'll have to be a way of steering our awareness, our attention away from the outside and systematically poising it just for a moment so that we get some level of joy. Joy being a disconnection with the thing that gives us trouble, gives us temptation and doubt and fear. That is why the Upanishads in several places will tell us that our goal is abhaya. And when we come to trying to portray in a manifested way, an anthropic way, a visualizing way of this abstract Brahman, we find a personal God and a portrayal of it, something with form. All the forms will have at least one hand in a mudra abhaya. So please, don't fear, nothing to fear. Since you sought protection from me, there is nothing to fear. So all these yogas or approaches really would be psychological processes because it's not the external thing that impinges on us. It is not the sense organs that are at fault. These are just objective organs. And the objects of our senses are just material objects. They say reject money, but money is just paper. It's an object. There's no sentiency in the normal sense of it. So how do we steady the mind? We have to steady the mind through dealing with things in situ as they arise in the working, waking world, and making sure we have a way of dealing with things as they arise in a sporting kind of way. So it helps for us to revalue the whole world as something like a play or a sport. We call it lila. The term lila maya, prakriti, nature, all of these are synonymous terms. They all mean the same thing. Since the whole universe is a series of oscillations, vibrations, waves, and since the mind is part and parcel of that, we have to control the mind. That means we have to control our response to the world, our reaction to the world, and when things knock us, our recovery. Like somebody running 100 meters, a well-trained person will also huff and puff just as much as an untrained person, but the recovery rate will be different. Somebody who trains themselves will recover quicker. Somebody who is doing it for the first time may limp across the border, across the end, across the finish line, be huffing and puffing, and maybe collapse. So there's the difference. So anything worthwhile requires training, and the mind is something that requires training. More accurately, some kind of probing mechanism in the mind called attention needs to be, when it is automatically jumps here and jumps there and jumps there, has to be steadied. And then the consciousness expressed in this way has to be withdrawn, as it were, to its own essence. The light has to be shone inward, as it were, instead of outward. And when we shine it inward, then we find our own true nature. And so up to this point, and this is part and parcel of the study of the Bhagavad Gita, we've learned how karma yoga is important. But we don't start with that. Sri Krishna starts by, here are the principles. The principle is essentially that you are not what you think you are. Your attention is geared toward making sure that this unit, which I mistakenly call I, namely a body and mind together, is something that has to be defended, something that has to struggle. But that's not what our philosophy says. Our philosophy says, no, at root, you are much more than what you think you are. The most valuable discovery of mankind is this, that at your root, at your inner essence, in your very heart, in your core, at the most subtle, the original cause, the causal entity in you is much more than something that is psycho-physical. It's an enduring entity. It has all full glory. And by attending to the glory of the self, this is called, when we do it systematically, that is when the attention wanders, to patiently catch hold of it and bring it back. Bring it back to what? Bring it back to the glory of the self, the inner self, not what we assume to be the self. That's just all superficial. That's also waves. No difference between the body and the objects. The object I take, let's say a cauliflower or a cabbage, and I put it in this and make an organic body from it. So what is this body? Yesterday's cabbage. Just transformed into something in a different form, something that is useful. For what? For me to control, for me to take hold of, and for me to steer all this mechanism and use it in order to discover what other people discovered, namely that there's a profound dimension in me, which is called the divine self, the infinite invisible, that sits in an unchanging way in the most subtle core of my being. When we get used to this idea by repetition, so what are the Upanishads? What are the Bhagavad Gita? What are all the scriptures? There are ways of making a repetition and a direction. Do this, don't do that. And do this and don't do that means there are ways to settle the mind, clarify the mind, purify the mind, so that revelation takes place from within by itself in an effortless way. Because we have the capacity to glide across the physical border inward, glide across the psychological border inward. We can glide there, and when habit says so many disturbances and the attention moves away again, we notice it and we pause a little bit and patiently say, come on, my friend, let's come inward. Let's discover that blissful joy, which is the basis of all our joy. So if we're dealing with the mind, and if all these approaches are to do with some way of settling all these disturbing waves in the mind, dominated by desires. Desires means I feel some kind of emptiness inside. I have to fill it from outside. The outside, this formula working back and forth, to and fro, this is most people's formula because the world is all they see and they take an empirical approach. The world is reality. Anything outside of that is non-real. So I had a conversation with somebody today, a kind of empiricist materialist. I pointed out, you see, every time, because his argument was, we can't know God, we can't understand God. I'm an atheist. Why? Because unless you define what God is, then how can you see God exists? I pointed out anything that you define will indicate something beyond its borders. If you put a small spot on the whiteboard, it indicates not only the spot, but the white space beyond it. The whiteboard has a space beyond it. Everything that you know of will have something beyond it. Every border that you impose in a temporal spatial way will have something beyond it. That will be the immediate inference. Something is always there beyond it. And so, in order to settle the mind, we have to take stock of its faculties. One faculty will be that we are a willing, doing entity. This comes out in personality types. So there's a kind of threefold nature that we have. And we stress one and not so much the other, bringing essentially three types of people, reactive people. One, doing, an impulse to do, an impulse to be restless. Sitting is not doing. They have to do it, and they have to do it now. So they kind of live in this impulsive moment. The mind being like that, and with all of us in that way, like this, whether we stress it or not, we find that all of us have to work. And the Gita has previously pointed out very subtly that even if you decide the disturbance comes when I work, the anxiety comes when I try and do or achieve. Supposing you come to that conclusion, you can't sit quiet because the very maintenance of your body has to be done. And in modern life, we can't just, we haven't got the luxury these days, or otherwise, of going out into a nearby forest and being hunter-gatherers or something like that, or catching herbs and so on from the forest, feeding ourselves in this way. Although theoretically, we could possibly do it very easily here in Ireland, because there are nettles all around. And if you take a precaution in picking it, and then put the leaf in hot water, the sting of it goes. And it's highly nutritious. And it's abundantly grown everywhere. When I came to this country, I thought, I will never starve here because these nettles are all around, free of charge. Mm-hmm. No matter about that, there's much more wastage here than you'll find in many other regions of the world. And so if you go to the back of any supermarket here in these Western countries, what you'll find is huge wastage. They put a saturation date, an expiry date on every item. And as soon as it hits that date or goes over that deadline, it's thrown away. And then you see we have enormous wastage because apples have to be round, tomatoes have to be round, but on the continent it's not like that. In Spain, it doesn't matter what shape your tomato is. The quality is the same. It has nothing to do with how it looks. It's how it tastes. It's what is the tremendous quality which is there, and a high quality thing doesn't necessarily have to look aesthetic or pleasing to the eye. So much wastage is there. In our waking life, we all do karma, activity. And in doing this activity, therefore, we have to make sure that it does not disturb the mind. Activity inherently disturbs the mind when we have a future orientation toward it. When we wish to achieve something, it's something in the future and it's for ourselves. The difficulty of egoism arises, that is, what's blocking us. and the difficulty of attachment arises, and the difficulty of desire arises, and that has a difficulty of future orientation, and future orientation gives us anxiety. How to perform our actions and have an equilibrium of mind, an equanimity of mind that is settling and not disturbing? The answer lies in karma yoga. So this is one kind of yoga that most people should be doing predominantly in this world. Now, that takes care of doing impulsive activity. It takes care of what we normally have to do, and what we normally do is associated with the mind, and it takes care of voluntary activities, because many activities are involuntary. But the voluntary activities we can take care of. And when the voluntary activities are trained, are steered in a certain direction, which is non-pain bearing, and in a direction that doesn't give us any disturbances, what we find then is this calmness, this calm settlement, a clarification of the mind. So all of these yogas have one purpose in mind. That purpose is purity. We work in order to purify the mind. Normally, so-called normally, people work to get a result. People work because there's an emptiness called a desire, and they have to fulfill the desire. But the same activity can be done by living in this present moment. And in this present moment, capturing with concentrated effort, any activity can be done with supreme mindfulness and awareness, with nothing further in mind, no future orientation in mind, and with a certain delight. So concentration is the key to all this mental control. And when we do work diligently, with good systematic systems, with a sense of diligence, a sense of patience, purity, patience, and perseverance, these are the three qualities that are required in sadhana. This is Swami Vivekananda. He brings out conveniently 3 Ps. Then what about when the mind is in an emotional state? And there are some people where that section of the mind is stressed. Maybe they feel from childhood a sense of abandonment. Maybe there's a sadness. We all suffer from all these kinds of difficulties. And the most astute and acute one is bereavement. Our attachment to somebody close to us, and they suddenly leave, or even not suddenly, there's an expected demise, we still are overwhelmed with sorrow. And I pointed out in a talk on the weekend, the goal in many places, Chandogya Upanishad, Katha Upanishad, is na shojati, that is, overcoming grief. You will never grieve. You will never grieve. Why? You do not grieve. Who doesn't grieve? Wise people do not grieve. Here you also find it in Srimad Bhagavad Gita as well. But are we wise? Evidently, if we grieve, we're not that wise. What makes the difference? The difference is the understanding that at core, there's no death. Understanding that fully, no grieving takes place, because things come and go, body comes and goes, waves come and go, vibrations come and go, oscillations come and go. Anything material and anything with parts will be disbanded. We have to acknowledge and recognize it. But our normal frame of mind is to think death happens to everybody except me. And we live our life as if we were immortal, physically immortal. Immortal in terms of the arrangement of our personality, our responses to the environment, the way we struggle, the way we relate to others, the way we conduct our 8 hours of life. See, I pointed out on the weekend, our life has 24 hours in it. And in those 24 hours, we can divide it into 8-hour segments. So we can say 8 hours working, 8 hours sleeping, 8 hours leisure. But what do we find? We don't find this work-life balance. Sometimes we find 16 hours work, no leisure. So how to meditate is a question brought up 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and they will find a formula for that. A kind of practical work-life balance is sought, no extremes. Anyhow, we'll come to that, how to deal with the emotional mind. Take all that energy that upsets us, that gives us tremendous sorrow and difficulties, and instead of analyzing it to death, we take it and steer it in a useful way. Steer it toward something that is called fixing the mind. On what? Fixing the mind on a loving God. Fixing a mind on the glory of the self. Or in religious language, fixing your mind on me, says Krishna. Krishna being one aspect of a personal God. Choose whatever personal God you want. Dedicate your whole or your energy in that direction. This is a formula that every religion has. What should we do to gain eternal life? Christ is asked. He says, I'm saying nothing new. What do your scriptures say? Deuteronomy and all that says, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your might, all your strength. In other words, take all your energy normally dispersed in stressful ways and direct it into blissful ways. And so this is Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is easiest to practice. Bhakti Yoga, it's no error, that is the dominant yoga for most religions. But also Karma Yoga, dedicating all your actions, if you can combine them, will put an added dimension, not only doing your work in a stressless way, that is, disassociating from the fruits. You have no right to any of those fruits or results because they're not yours, they don't belong to you. So this is stressed by Sri Krishna after elucidating the principles. But he also mentions jnana and describes it in this way, Sankhya. This is not the Sankhya philosophy, one of the 6 philosophies within the range of and scope of Vedanta. No, this dualistic system of Sankhya is not what is meant. What is meant is jnana yoga. Jna indicating knowledge. English words such as cognizance, recognize, etc., cognition, even the word knowledge will come from this root, jna. So jna, knowledge, knowing. What is the reality when we look around us? Well, we know things, but we don't seem to cognize that how we value them in a permanent way, in an enduring way, how we value them as the most important things is not the reality. The more we study modern physics, the more we realize this. And so there has to be a process where we discern. So that section of the mind which has an intellect, which has a thinking, reasoning faculty, a logical aspect to it, has to be applied as well. Otherwise, what we find is what we call a mind, or that section of the mind, is inundated with noisy traffic, where our attention goes in all kinds of scattered directions. The scattered nature of the mind, instead of ekagra, one-pointedness. So we have to have this capacity. We have the capacity already, but this technique, if you will, of constantly discerning what is permanent, what is not permanent. In this sense, what is enduring and what is not, what is real, what is unreal. See that asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, etc. Lead us from the unreal to the real. This is nothing more than jnana yoga. And jnana yoga will then, having discerned what is what, we'll see that this glory of the self operates through many, many different arms and legs and hands and heads and so on. That will be our conclusion. And we'll be naturally, spontaneously drawn to selfless service, generosity of spirit to serve all. We see that this flow of energy occurs in every limb and everything that moves. All sentient life is simply expressed in a manifested way, so that we can make a distinction instead of making a mistake to say that the light or the lamp bulb is the one that shines and is exclusively responsible. And when it goes out, we have to curse it or have a funeral for it. The poor light went out. What a pity. Invite all the light bulb relatives and have a big funeral about it. No, we don't do that because we're sensible enough to realize the light bulb can be replaced. The light bulb is just an adapter, and behind it is an electrical current, unseen, invisible to the naked eye. And yet we know when we put a suitable adapter there, it displays whatever we want it to display according to the nature of the adapter. This whole universe is a multiple adapter like that, with a current behind it that runs. That current is the reality. This is the process of jnana yoga for those of keen intellect or subtle intellect. So that takes care of the intellect side of the mind. And then, of course, having seen all these three faculties of the mind that operate in us, we can easily understand we are all not exclusively one or the other. And so Swami Vivekananda makes it very clear in his description of the four yogas and in the emblem of the Ramakrishna order and movement and motto and mission that four yogas or techniques are represented. But what about the fourth? The fourth is called Raja Yoga or Dhyana Yoga. That is the yoga of self-control, controlling the mind through a process of concentration. All of them involve concentration, of course. If I take the emotional energy that I normally have and concentrate it toward an object of love, namely God, that's concentration. It's simply concentrating the emotions. When I'm concentrating, when I'm taking all the activities, and when I am consolidating them, and when I am channeling them in a specific way, so that these are concentrated activities, living in the present, making sure no errors are there, tremendous equilibrium, tremendous efficiency, skill in action. This is how it's described in the Bhagavad Gita. When I do that, it's also concentration applied, but concentration with the hands, so to speak. One is concentration with the hands. One is concentration with the heart. Jnana, concentration with the intellect. All of them are concentrations. But a fourth faculty is there, namely, we can relax. There are moments when the mind is not agitated. When we concentrate the mind in a specific way and take the attention and steer it in an inward movement and patiently do that and bring it back to the glory of the self. This is called Dhyana Yoga, Dhyana meditation, or Raja Yoga. Why is it described as Raja Yoga, royal path? Because within it, disagree with any of the conclusions, metaphysical conclusions that arise in the philosophy, and still practice it. So we can meditate on God. That's a theistic kind of meditation. Or we can meditate on an impersonal principle. Or we can meditate on any object, actually. And so the literature for that is contained in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And Swami's book on Raja Yoga is a very useful, extensive commentary on the process, an extensive commentary, sutra by sutra, of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. But what about Bhakti Yoga? Well, we have the Narada Bhakti Sutras and the Bhagavatam. In terms of sutra literature, we have the very useful Narada Bhakti Sutras. Very concise, very beautiful, very profound. So in this way, we have a specific technique, well worked out, to cater for every aspect of the mind, even that where the mind can be positioned in a kind of state which is neither waking, nor dream, nor dreamless sleep, but a constructed scene, a constructed object taking place, where we can make use of our faculties in a creative way and steer the mind so that it glides across the external border and awakens the internal border. And the object of it, and of all the yogas, would be purification of the mind, all being a psychological technique, all there designed to pacify all the waves which we find. All the vrittis in the chitta is the description that the Sankhya's use. So does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
The difference between all these approaches. And of course, I was saying that all the approaches in an integrated way is probably better. That is why Swami Vivekananda says, one or more or all of these, and be free. And the suggestion is that we balance our lives by balancing all of them. And that's not just that suggestion. The suggestion is also there in the Bhagavad Gita as well. So we'll pick up the Bhagavad Gita then. And the last time that I recall, because we haven't met for a while on this Bhagavad Gita, and having described then a number of things that we have to, we don't start with sitting, by the way. You see, this is an error that people make, and forgive me if I am repeating things, because we haven't met for a long time. There may be a tendency to repeat some of these things. But we don't start meditation with sitting. See the difficulty people have with meditating. Those people who are active, impulsive doing people will sit down and give up, possibly, and say, I can't meditate. I met, there was somebody on the weekend. It occurs to me that they are sitting here. How is your meditation? No, it's not my cup of tea. See? So, well, meditation has nothing to do with tea, by the way. It's not a beverage. But what's in the way? We have to discover what is the obstacle to the process of clarifying and purifying the mind. Many obstacles are there. But let's see some of the personality-based obstacles. One will be, as soon as a doing person sits down, then they say, I have the impulse to do, not to sit. And so as I'm sitting, all the time there's an inner commentary that says, I'm sitting, this is a waste of time, I'd rather be doing, and they get up. Why? Because they were not practicing karma yoga. They were not controlling the mind or controlling their activities in the normal process of their life. That means that when they sit for meditation, all the disturbances of the activities crowd in. Same thing with an analyzing kind of person, thinking kind of person, intellectually orientated, and sit down, all the traffic noise of thoughts comes in and crowds the mind and they get disturbed. Same thing with an emotionally orientated person, all their feelings well up and become a disturbance for them. And there are different types of meditation available. Some meditations will try to analyze your feelings. Well, that wouldn't be suitable for somebody who's already inherently doing it. They'll go into depression. Another kind of person will be an active doing person and so on and so forth. That's fine. But they will be steady enough when they sit because they have arrived at a certain steadiness in their normal daily activity. And this is attended to as a preamble to meditation, as a preparation for it. So there has to be some self-control. This was covered in the previous stanzas of the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which we won't repeat. But suffice to say this, that and we can do it with a quotation from Ramakrishna, as is the wont in this study of the Bhagavad Gita. He says, when seen from the plains, the grass on the lawn and the deodar tree on the border of the lawn present strikingly contrasting pictures. But if they are seen from the peak of a mountain, they would all blend into one even verdure. Similarly, and this is, of course, you would have understood this If we had the example we have today of an aircraft, as you take off, you can see there's a tree. Oh, but now it's a green blur with so many other trees. And of course, even more exaggerated when you see it from outer space and you see the globe. So, but if they're seen from the peak of a mountain, they would all blend into one even verdure. Similarly, the earth-bound man views one as a sovereign, another as a sweeper, one as a father, another as a son, and so on. But after intuiting God within them as the fundamental nature for all of these entities, after doing that, these differences vanish. And this is in the context of an equal vision, equal way of thinking for people of different status and people in general who on the surface have differences. There is no more of the good and the bad, the high and the low. God perception alone prevails everywhere. So what is the self-preparation? Having understood that, we're already prepared in our daily habitual life. But what is the specific preparation one should undergo? And so the next few stanzas will describe the favorable environment is necessary thereafter. And we will make a commentary on this because it's very important. So the stanza goes like this. Yogi junjita satatam atmanam rahasi stitaha ekaki yatachit atma nirashye apira grahaha. The yogi should always try to concentrate, that is satatam, constantly try to concentrate his mind living alone in solitude, having subdued his mind and body and got rid of desires and possessions. Well, literally, really, apira graha, free from greed is really what it is. And so, yatachita atma, one with body and mind controlled, and free from hope, free from anxiety. It's no longer meditation, free from anxiety. That is near ashihi, free from hope. From hope means anxiety that accompanies it. If I hope to get something, it's a bracketed version in my own inner dialogue, which says, I may not get it, and I haven't got it now. Anxiety comes in. The beauty of our understanding and our discovery of this profound dimension of man is we have it already. What is meditation? What is all this purification? It's removing all the obscuring coverings, taking off all the obstacles one by one systematically. Be patient about it. Understand what they are and start removing them. So, should always try. That means it's no good having erratic practice. What we call spiritual practice sadhana is steady practice, not erratic. Not doing one thing today and not doing it tomorrow. And in this regard, we have to select right environment, right time of day, be systematic about it, be constant about it. Just with any other practice is the same. Supposing somebody says, you're going to cycle 20 miles or 20 kilometers, then a wise person, which is not the one sitting here, obviously, a wise person will practice. And they won't practice the whole 620 kilometers. They'll practice 9 kilometers. And then every day practice, and then increase it by a few kilometers. Increase it, until ultimately they're doing 20 kilometers a day. Then they're doing 30 kilometers, then 40, then 50, ultimately 90 kilometers. And then 90 kilometers, they might try for 100 kilometers. If you do 100 kilometers a day, or if you do even 150 kilometers a day, if you can work yourself up to that, then doing 150 kilometers a day on average would be not so difficult for you, not so challenging. It requires steady practice. But if you decide that you'll do today and not tomorrow and not next week and pick it up in a month's time, That will not be adequate preparation. Now, living alone in solitude, grihasi, also means in quietude. Why in solitude? When you sit for meditation, there should only be you and the Lord. That's all. And how easy is that to do when other people are there in a room or in an environment? Group meditation, not so easy. The natural human tendency is to be self-conscious and to hear other people shuffling. And so it is important that you go into solitude. Even if you are in a room by yourself and it's an environment where others are staying, but not necessarily in that room, still the mind will understand and be aware of it. And others will be aware of it too. And this potentially disturbs it. So we are laying out what is the easiest thing to do. Get the ideal environment from the very start. And having subdued his mind, so solitude, you stick on that for a while. Solitude, quietude is necessary also. Quietude externally and quietude internally as well. We are so used to noise that when we are by ourselves, the mind gets easily distracted. What is the test of somebody who is a sincere practitioner? Ramakrishna gives this interesting statement. The truly virtuous man is he who commits no sin, even when he is all by himself. It's easy not to do anything wrong if you're surrounded by other people, because it comes up, what will they think of me? Will they think badly of me? Will my name be tarnished? But in secret, by yourself, what are your thoughts and what are your activities? That is no virtue which is practiced for fear of public opinion. He alone is established in self-control, who does not lustfully think of a woman in privacy or in public. He alone is established in self-control. Of course, this is arranged in a male orientation, but it's as valid for any gender. He is established in self-control who does not cast a covetous eye on the gold coins that he comes across, even in a deserted house. That alone is virtue which is practiced quietly and unostentatiously. And here we can think of Christ giving the example of a Pharisee going up to the front and making a big show and as loud a voice as possible. Oh Lord, see, I often think of caricatures in this way, going to church, and the minister may say in a loud and booming voice, so it echoes all around the pillars and the vaults on the ceiling. Oh great Lord, oh great God, as if God was deaf. And a little showy probably, see. A kind of superficial ritualist. You imagine a Pharisee doing it, every religion will have it, and showing off. See what a great devotee I am. With a humble, real, virtuous person sitting in the back, hardly noticed. I'm not worthy to approach like that. So, pray to your Father in secret. Close your closet and pray to your Father in secret, I think is Christ's sayings. So there's a great value in solitude, quietude. This is why we go on retreat, which are silent retreats. There's too much noise normally going on, and people feel uncomfortable when there's silence in this era that we live in today. So that even if a person is by themselves in a car with an opportunity of loving and repeating God's name, what will they tend to do? Yes, there's this little movement they do. They turn the radio on, something like it. Turn some sound on.
Now they look at the phone.
Or the phone.
Yeah. Go on Facebook.
Thumb exercise, Facebook, whatever it is, Instagram, all the social media. People are so much engaged in that. There has to be a busyness in the mind everywhere. And as long as that busyness is there, we don't get the clarity. We don't get the purity. That's the point. So there are many, many useful tips which are given in Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga under the section called First Steps, and I'll read this out. Early morning and early evening are the 2 points of calmness, he says. Your body will have a like tendency to become calm at those times. Very often it's asked, when should we meditate, at what times of day? We will take advantage of that natural condition and begin then to practice. Why do you want to make meditation difficult for you? Make it easy. Select a nice right time of day. Make it a rule not to eat until you have practiced. I make that a rule for all these spiritual activities. So others come here and they have to eat before they come. But I don't do it. 1 cup of tea I had with him, but I never ate anything. Make it a rule not to eat until you have practiced. If you do this, the sheer force of hunger will break your laziness. One obstacle, laziness. Physical laziness and mental laziness. Mental laziness is to do with lack of enthusiasm. Lack of enthusiasm is to do with lack of conviction that it is worthwhile to do what you're doing. Lack of conviction means I'm not convinced of the very principles behind this practice. And that is why we have the philosophy approached from so many different sides. I've told previously on the weekend that the Upanishads have this technique. If you didn't understand from this point of view, maybe from this one. If you didn't understand from this one, maybe that one. If you didn't understand from that one, well, there's a different approach, and all the teachings is progressive. That means a good teacher will tell you not the end thing, not the final conclusion. You won't understand that, but step by step, can we kind of assess what your status is right now? And let's deal with that. Deal with the starting point on the basis you cannot run before you walk, and you cannot walk until you crawl, and you cannot crawl until you turn over from your back to your front. So all of these have to be done progressively. What is your individual capacity? And a good teacher will tell you from there. We'll take it for advantage, your point of view. We'll accept temporarily, momentarily, your point of view at the moment. Deal with that and try to urge you to a next, deeper, more subtle understanding of it. And so Jesus himself does this by these various phrases. The Father in heaven, something separate, dualism. And then I'm a vine and you're the branches, a kind of qualified non-dualism, Vishishtadvaita, which says there's a connection. And finally, Advaita, I and the Father are one. If you started off with the last one first, you'll get into trouble. People won't understand. They'll say, but I'm a real person operating in a real world. Don't tell me this world doesn't exist. I banged my head against a wall and here's the bruise. So in India, they teach children never to eat until they have practiced and worshipped, and it becomes natural to them after time. A boy will not feel hungry until he has bathed and practiced. Those of you who can afford it will do better to have a room for this practice alone. Do not sleep in that room. It must be kept holy. And if you have a family room, don't also keep it to yourself. Give other people, be generous enough to share what you have with others and let them put appropriate symbols there. Do not sleep in that room and so on. You must not enter the room until you have bathed and are perfectly clean in body and mind. Place flowers in that room always. They are the best surroundings for a yogi. Also pictures that are pleasing. Burn incense morning and evening. Have no quarreling or anger or unholy thought in that room. Only allow those persons to enter who are of the same thought as you. Don't put a bar on there for those who have the same thought. Then by and by, there'll be an atmosphere of holiness in the room. What is holiness? It's an atmosphere that you bring up, that you inculcate, that every brick in the wall absorbs, because your thought was that on a daily basis, whenever you entered it. your thought was that. This is the key to holy places. And when you are miserable, sorrowful, doubtful, or your mind is disturbed, the very fact of entering that room will make you calmer. I have it noted here that last week we had much more than people sitting here for some reason or other. Well, it's difficult sometimes for people to come on a weekday. We understand that. But Swami Yogatmananda was our special guest. It was right and fitting that we had a good attendance, and we did. But one of the ladies remarked, says, as soon as I come in here, it always makes me calm. Even after a day's work and disturbances and difficulties and the mind being upset, as soon as I walk in, I feel fine. You see? This was the idea of the temple and the church, and in some temples and churches you will find it even now. But in the majority of them, the very idea has been lost, he says. The idea is that by keeping holy vibrations there, the place becomes and remains illumined. And those who cannot afford to have a room set apart can practice anywhere they like. Don't let that be an obstacle. How is your meditation? Oh, I'll start next week. What's the difficulty? I don't have a place yet. Oh, I see. You do it anywhere. Because everywhere you go, you carry the mind with you. And you carry the potential and the capacity to calm that mind. And you carry God with you. Don't think that you need a special place to access God. This is just making it easier for you. Those who cannot afford to have a room set apart can practice anywhere they like. Sit in a straight posture, and the first thing to do is to send a current of holy thought to all creation. Mentally repeat, let all beings be happy, let all beings be peaceful, let all beings be blissful. So do the east, south, north, and west. And the more you do that, the better you'll feel yourself. You will find at last that the easiest way to make yourselves healthy is to see that others are healthy. And the easiest way to make yourselves happy is to see that others are happy. So these are some of the practical things, and we'll finish off just with one stanza then. So, Chao deshe pratishtatya stiram asanam atmanaha na chuchritam na tinicham kaya jina kushattaram. So cha, in a clean place. Having firmly fixed in a clean place. These instructions are very, very systematic, very precise. The seat neither set too high nor too low, and having spread over it kusha grass, deerskin, and cloth, one over the other. What's the idea about it? Of course, you have to get the idea, not the ingredients. How is your meditation? I never got kusha grass yet. I couldn't find a clean white cloth. At deerskin, I looked everywhere in antique shops. I never found it. Should I shoot a deer and make one? So what's the idea about it? The purport of this, firstly, a clean place. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Make it clean. Now make yourself clean physically. And a clean place means the mind easily becomes purified. The seat is neither too high nor too low. You don't want to fall off, become dizzy and fall off. You get some people saying, oh, I meditate. Oh, how do you meditate? Yes, I love this meditation. After yoga exercise, I lie on the floor and relax. And you know what? It's so peaceful. Sooner or later, I begin snoring. Well, that's the wrong posture. A vertical posture is not what is meant here. So asana, seat is important. Neither too high nor too low. You don't want to be too low to the ground. You want to be don't want to be too high. You don't want to be disturbed by things on the ground. And spread kusha grass because you don't want moisture to come through. You don't want to be wet. And a deer skin gives some element of comfort, some kind of proper seat which is there. And a cloth covering it. You don't have abrasion with anything underneath, so something that is smooth, one over the other. And of course, every ritual, you can investigate what is its deeper meaning. So 3 things are mentioned there: kusha grass, deerskin, cloth. These can represent the 3 gunas, if you like. So very precise instructions, but then the question, how should one practice meditation? And then the actual process is explained. The method is explained from the 12th to the 15th stanza. And so we'll go on to that. I'll simply give a preamble to it or a glimpse of it to start with. Sitting there on his seat, making the mind one-pointed and restraining the thinking faculty and the senses, should practice yoga. Why? And the beautiful expression, we practice yoga for Atma Vishuddhaye, the purification of the self. There are many people who say, I meditate. Okay, why do you meditate? To get peace of mind. This is not the meditation that is mentioned here. Why do you meditate? To be relaxed and stress-free. This is not the kind of meditation that is mentioned here. Meditation, for it to have the effect of self-purification or purification of the mind, has 2 components that should be missing. First person singular and future tense. These should be absent in meditation. So with those thoughts, I leave you. We'll pick this up next week. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.